Hey everybody, this is Ed from the Whiskey Tangent Podcast, and we're here with another Whiskey Short. I'm here with Scott.
Hey everybody.
And we have a couple guests here today, Anders.
Yo.
And Gabe.
Hello.
And we're going to do one of our world famous quick tastes. Very excited. Scott?
Yeah, well, so for the third Whiskey Short quick taste in a row, we're having another solicited quick taste, and this one is Legent.
Whiskey Short.
Someone from the marketing team for Beam Suntory, her name was Gabby, reached out to us and asked to try Legent and feature it on our podcast. And of course, we said, hell yes.
Yeah. And Gabby put us in touch with Adam Harris, the senior brand ambassador with Beam Suntory. And we're going to be talking to Adam later.
And then they sent 2 bottles.
Yeah. What's really great is we're a big fan of that distillery. And yet it is a product that we never tried.
Yeah, that's true. We had seen it on the shelves.
And it's the first new whiskey they've put out since the 90s.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So that's another exciting thing.
Yeah.
And
cool.
we've been very outspoken about how impressed we were from the small batch collection from 92, which we've run through it again, Booker's, Baker's, Knob Creek, Basil Hayden, and the things they've done with Little Book 3. And we did a Japanese episode with Suntory Toki that Anders was with us. And so to have them reach out to us was really a great honor, and to have a product that we've never tried. It's been on our list, but hell, we just did Baker's.
Right. We're only 20 years behind the time.
We're still 20 years behind on Baker's.
Yeah, so I have just 3 paragraphs of information about this whiskey, all from their website.
Right.
And then we're going to taste it. And then Ed's going to give us a little bit more details about what the company might not want you to know about it. No, actually, it's just details.
I don't know why I'm like, really? Because I don't have any smoking gun like that at all. It's an interesting story, though.
Yeah. So they bill it as the creation of a new style of whiskey. Steeped in over 200 years of bourbon-making heritage and nearly 100 years of Japanese artistry, Legent is forged in collaboration by 2 of the world's most revered whiskey makers. Beam Master Distiller Fred No's life has always revolved around the whiskey distillery, looking for new challenges, and Legent was a chance to do something that nobody's ever done before, create a unique bourbon by combining his distilling experience with the craft of Japanese blending, specifically that of Shinji Fukuyo, who, as Suntory's chief blender, has traveled the world over, from Japan to Scotland to Kentucky, learning, studying, and perfecting the art of blending whiskey. Bourbon isn't a spirit that's blended routinely, and Shinji wanted to honor Fred's family heritage. After years of tasting, testing, and refining the recipe with Fred, Legent was born. It starts out like a traditional bourbon, with premium grains of corn, rye, and malted barley, and time-honored recipe created by Fred's family. Every drop crafted with calcium-rich, iron-free limestone water, and aged for at least 4 years in select, newly charred white oak barrels.
Ooh. Oh, nice. Nice.
Imbuing the flavors of caramel, oak, and vanilla.
Right, traditional.
Yeah.
And then
things get interesting. Some of the spirit is then finished in ex-sherry casks to impart layers of spice and dried fruit, and another portion is aged in ex-red wine casks, which lends a light tartness and acidity to offset the sweeter notes. And that's when Shinji takes over, meticulously blending the 2 wine-finished bourbons with more of the original spirit to create a perfectly balanced and rounded whiskey that's also complex and layered. On your palate, it starts out like a bourbon, rich, warm, oaky. But then, like a Japanese whiskey, its bright and smooth complexity builds to an unexpectedly long finish. Legent is a landscape-changing whiskey, taking what you expect from a Kentucky straight bourbon and expanding it into a world of new ideas and possibilities. So whether you're being served Legent by your favorite bartender, looking at you, Honors.
Hey there.
Or you're pouring it for friends at home, looking at you, Gabe.
Yep.
This unique bourbon's distinct flavor profile comes to life when the first drop hits the glass.
Fred No, he mentioned that the word blending was a dreaded term when he was growing up.
Absolutely.
Because back then it meant you were taking some type of grain neutral spirit, mixing it with some artificial colors. Mm-hmm. And so he's had to turn his mind around on that because blending now is different. And we've talked about it, I mean, High West and Jefferson and
we just
Blood
did the short of the fistful of bourbon.
Fistful of bourbon.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that they would keep some of the spirit unfinished.
Yeah.
Then you got the sherry and the red wine.
Yeah.
And was it Fukuyo?
Fukuyo.
After he gets all the whiskeys together, he puts them in a giant tank, whatever the mixture is he feels is the proper blend.
Mm-hmm. I see.
And that kind of integrates the flavors even more dramatically.
I'll tell you what, the nose on this stuff is amazing. After what Scott was just describing, I got like 12 different smells. Burnt sugar, apricot, dried fruits, corn, leather, spice, orange zest.
Wow.
Wow, Dave, you're getting a lot from this.
I've been sniffing like a
Man,
mofo.
Jesus, you got the whiskey thesaurus open. One of the more pleasing on the nose of whiskeys I've ever really smelled. 'Cause a lot of times I just get fire and like vanilla.
Yeah.
Anders, what do you think?
No, absolutely. I definitely get the dark fruit. It's pretty jammy. I get like a orange peel in there as well. Mm-hmm. It smells super desserty.
The whiskey jug says on the nose, oak, strawberry Necco wafers, spice, roasted peanuts, bits of vanilla, fresh biscuits, and green apples.
Necco wafer, that's an obscure reference.
First of all, Necco wafers were created in like the 1840s, before the Civil War.
Yeah.
While you're in the Civil War, you're eating Necco wafers while you're getting shot at Gettysburg. That's how old that candy is, and you can still get it today.
They're basically like a Rolaids with the flavor to them.
Actually, Rolaids have a lot more flavor.
Man.
And I eat them a lot more than Neccos.
And lots of calcium.
Oh, damn.
It's like the one house at Halloween, like, the old lady lives there. Oh, hi, kids. I got some Necco wafers and some bit of honey.
Here's your tropical fruit Rolaids.
Oh my God. Can you imagine like one of those Civil War letters written with like, oh, my darling Annabelle, it has been nearly 2 fortnights since I've seen you, but fortunately I have been able to sustain myself over these Necco wafers that you sent me.
Right, thank mother for the Necco wafers.
Right.
So let's taste it now. We've kept everybody on the edge of their seats.
Right, with a Necco wafers tangent. So sweet initially, and then I get peanuts and oak.
Yeah.
Wow, it changes right in mid-sip. It's crazy. Like, the sweetness is all in the beginning, and then
The heat comes at you.
heat comes at you, and it ends not sweet, really.
Yeah, there's a little spice. After it's gone, my tongue feels spicy.
Yeah, it's holding the heat after the swallow. It's,
So we didn't mention the proof. The proof is 94.
Right, and so I'm going to mine that I've had on the rocks for about 4 minutes. Okay, on the water, I definitely taste the green apples more now.
Oh, really?
It actually has improved the finish. I didn't initially like the finish at that much neat, but now I feel like it's opened up and the finish has a little bit more substance to it.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting more fruit with the proof down version. It's a lot sweeter
very nice.
initially.
Whiskey jugs, palate, oak, char, peanuts, dark fruity candy sweetness, wine sweetness, caramel, candy corn, nuts, and touches of roasted corn and spice.
Yeah, I mean, we're all right there. That we agree with.
Yeah, the nose we weren't really on board with, but the palate is perfect.
It's interesting how light it is. Like, that's where I think that Japanese whiskey influence comes in. Because those dark fruit notes, it's really jammy up front, both on the nose and on the palate. You kind of expect it to be, like, heavier and, like, a slower
It's true. It lightens
finish.
at the very end.
Yeah. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it is.
And, I mean, I don't know how this would be in a cocktail. That would be interesting. It's certainly price point where you could mix it if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Anders, where would you use this? Well, I said, go make a cocktail with this.
Okay.
Well, and I may actually say that one day.
Yeah.
Maybe today.
Maybe do it now.
I think this would really work with something that plays in more to the lightness and like the fruit forward thing. I wouldn't do like a scofflaw or anything like that.
Right.
I feel like
Right,
that's
it would
a little
cover it.
too jammy and it'll cover it up.
Yeah.
I'd say kind of like a twist on a Manhattan, like a Red Hook, or you add a little bit of maraschino liqueur just to kind of bring out some of those fruit notes. I think it'd be interesting to see how it contrasts with like the peanut, but that'd be the direction that I'd probably want to go with.
Yeah. So,
So Ed, give us some details on the overview that I gave that was just on their website.
well, I think what's interesting is the first time I heard that Jim Beam had been bought by a Japanese company was now Beam Suntory. I'm like, I don't know, I just didn't like that. I'm like, what does Japan know about whiskey coming over here and buying our whiskey company that has a 100-year history? And the reality is that was an ignorant statement because Japan's been making whiskey since the 30s.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm much more educated now. And
Yes.
what I like about it is that the Suntory Master Blender, Shinji Fukuyo, the 5th master blender they've had.
Yeah.
And Jim Beam's master distiller, Fred Note, the 7th in a row from his family. So they didn't really care about the corporate side of it. These guys are whiskey makers. They looked at it as craftsmen. They said, let's get together and make a product. Let's use the resources. I have you have me. Instead of being separate and acting like we don't exist, let's exist.
In fact, you think about it and it's like, what took them so long?
Yeah.
Been like 5 or 6 years, right?
Well, it probably took them that long to get comfortable with the idea of working together. 5 or 6 years. There's a lot going on with the merger. So, yeah. Plus, they had to barrel the whiskey that they wanted to use, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's also true. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. But this is their regular mash bill of stuff. That's 77% corn, 13% rye, and 10% malted barley. They have that laying around. So they don't really have to wait for it to age.
It says after years of tinkering, they landed on a final blend, mostly straight bourbon aged at least 4 years with, once again, we said the red wine, cask finished bourbon as the secondary component, and the sherry cask finished bourbon as the small smallest amount. Okay.
Wait, do they give it an actual percentage?
They do not.
Okay.
So that is the way they broke down the ratios. So when we get somebody on the horn pretty soon from Beam Suntory, we're going to ask them a few questions, where the name come from, because I don't know what Legent means.
No.
I want some answers, damn it. Get No on the phone right now.
And what about the red wine? Like, which red wine?
Which red wine isn't? Why is that? And also, red wine.
God damn it, I was about to say
that. Well, I'll wait for the crickets to stop. Okay.
So I think at this point we should take a break, set up our Zoom call with the Jim Beam Senior Brand Ambassador, Adam Harris, and talk to him for a bit.
Well, all right. Let's definitely do that.
Be right back.
Okay, so we're on with Adam Harris, Senior Beam Brand Ambassador. Adam, welcome to the Whiskey Tangent Podcast.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Thanks for coming on. We're really excited to be featuring Legent and also to talk to you, a representative of Beam Suntory, because we're huge fans of your products.
Thanks.
Okay, so Scott, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, we're curious about how you become a brand ambassador. Like, what's your background? And specifically, how did you become the Senior Brand Ambassador for Jim Beam?
Yeah. So I've been working for the distillery for just over 14 years now. And prior to that, I had done the better part of a decade working behind bars in New York City, where I've had just a real love for bourbon and was able to sort of share that love and incubate my own knowledge base on bourbon as the category started to grow. And this was in the very infancy of the Renaissance, right? And so the bourbons, and I worked at a nice bar, nice cocktail bar attached to a steakhouse down in Tribeca. And we had a lot of whiskeys. We had a lot of Scotch. We had a lot of Irish. We had a lot of good Canadian. And then the bourbons, obviously Maker's Mark, Knob Creek, Basil Hayden, maybe a little Booker's Bakers. So the small batch was covered, and it went from Jack Daniels to those premium bourbons. So I had the chance to kind of cut my teeth on those bourbons and experiencing and exploring profiles and histories and things like that. And then more and more bottles started showing up. Woodford showed up and Bulleit showed up, and just gave me the opportunity to get to know more about the bourbon category. And I started eventually educating the staff. I would do like little Thursday sessions where they would come to the bar and I would talk about the bourbons. My reputation got around to where Maker's Mark was looking for an ambassador. And so they asked me if I would work for them in New York City. And it took me all of 2 seconds to say yes. And then I did that. I worked for our fantastic distillery in Loretto exclusively for the better part of 6 years. And now the last 7, 8, I've worked representing all of our American whiskey. And now I represent pretty exclusively all the great stuff that comes out of Claremont, which is home to Legent bourbon. So I'd love to tell you that it was my degree in environmental science that led me to be a brand ambassador, but that had nothing to do with it. It was really kind of right place, right time, talking about the right stuff and enjoying the right stuff with the right people.
We definitely cut our teeth on the small batch releases from Booker No. We've talked about it many times on the podcast. And you used the term Renaissance. We also feel that bourbons and ryes are just now getting back to the level of production and variety that they had before Prohibition.
Anytime to be a bourbon drinker or bourbon maker, yeah. There's a nice symmetry going on in our history, too, where I think when you look before Prohibition, bourbon and rye were pretty equal in popularity. Then after Prohibition ended, I think you saw the surge in bourbon appreciation, and that was really the first golden era of bourbon, really, in the 50s, and then eventually started that downward slope. You saw the bourbon industry really kind of kick the can by the 70s, 80s. And I think that now, brighter days are with us and certainly ahead of us. But I think it's also quite nice that you noticed about 5 years ago or so, as this bourbon thing really got popular, that you started to see rye becoming popular again. But I think it's only kind of right, that bourbon would have gotten its popularity on the coattails of rye, 100 plus something years ago. And now for rye to kind of be having its resurgence on the coattails of bourbon, I have no qualm with sharing the spotlight with another American great whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about why we're here. Legent. First of all, where did the name come from?
Yeah.
So Legent, the name. It's an interesting name, right? You can't look it up in the dictionary. It's a word that never existed. What it came from was people sitting in a room talking about this product, talking about the people behind it. Shinji Fukuyo, who's a legend in his right, and Fred No, a living legend in his right. This project started happening shortly after Beam Suntory became a thing. So you start looking at our cultures coming together. You look at an allegiance that we have between our Suntory home and then our Beam family here, and the alliances that are formed. All good alliances, not like Survivor alliances or anything, but I think that kicking around those three big words in a nebulous sort of space, Legent came out of it. It always kind of drives back to the legends, right? I always think the word itself, if you need to kind of wrap it up for somebody, Legent works for the fact that we have two legends behind this bourbon.
Oh, so it is based on legend, which is what we initially thought. It's kind of like a version of legends plural, right?
Yeah, if you will.
I'll let you go ahead and run with that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll have fun with it for sure. Okay, so you started to talk about the collaboration a little bit. Can you speak to how that all came about?
Like I said, it started not shortly after we became something over 5 years ago. It was Beam Suntory. We realized that we are whiskey makers. When you look at the door, right? Beam and Suntory. With Beam, we're talking about 225 years of whiskey making heritage going back 8 generations now. When you talk about the Tory family, the original family of Japanese whiskey who started in 1923. So there's that first family of bourbon, that first family of Japanese whiskey. And obviously whiskey being as popular as it is, I think that there was a real want and a desire to see what we could do to create a product that only we could create. And knowing that bourbon is incredibly popular right now, we knew that we wanted to make a bourbon, but we wanted to see how we could take the soul of a Kentucky bourbon and finesse it with some of that Japanese nuance that we love in things like Hakushu and Hibiki and Yamazaki and all the wonderful whiskeys that come from Suntory properly. So really thinking about, where are our strengths? Whiskey making is an American strength. Being able to provide big, bold flavors that people love. Booker was really big about big, full flavors in the small batch. His son, Fred, has really kind of carried that torch, as Freddie does now, too, with our 8th generation coming up. And so relying on the strengths of making whiskey in Kentucky, relying on where we get our water, our mashbill, our yeast, all that stuff that means so much to the DNA of the bourbon portion of this equation, and then aging it in Kentucky where we get those flavors. So Fred really is the author of the first chapter of Legent. And then there's the second chapter of Legent, which is going to be about maturation. And like I did just say, we do mature everything in Kentucky. But Fred and Shinji have worked together to identify some finishes. And we'll break it down into 3 different liquid streams. We'll have the majority of this blend be an overaged Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. And then we'll have some other extra aged bourbon that we will then put into California Cabernet barrel and an Oloroso sherry barrel. Those barrel finishes will last for up to 2 full summers. So we have a nice exposure as the barrel breathes in during the summertime, getting into the residual flavors that are left from the California Cabernet, from the Oloroso sherry, and then also whatever sort of influence we can gather from the French oak coming from the Cabernet barrel, and then also the Spanish oak coming from the sherry barrel. Yes, Ed?
Yeah, so they were finished in this country?
Yes. Yep, and in Kentucky.
Okay, because we were wondering if you had to send all of the whiskey to Japan for the finishing and the blending, that would have been a laborious process to do that, and really difficult to keep the whiskey at the price point if you're shipping it across the ocean and back. So, right. Okay, it makes a lot more sense now.
Well, I tell you what, I don't think Fred has realized this or not, but there are a lot of really late night Zoom calls that he and Shinji were doing in order to kind of communicate at the right time when they were both awake, and Shinji checking in on what's happening here with the whiskey aging. So they were a little bit ahead of the game. They've been doing these Zooms and Skypes and all this stuff for years, and we're just getting used to it over the last 6 months, right? So I don't know if Fred will ever consider himself trailblazer in technology, but there you go.
Yeah, right. So a question I have is this. This is the first new brand since the original small batch release back in 92. So not to be flippant, but what took you guys so long?
Yep, it's a great question. And I know that there were times when I would be in innovation phone calls where you would think that the product would do well on its own, with its own name, things like that. But that's just not been our ethos, really, to be honest. So we've always kind of looked to extend lines. We've looked to expand the name of already known products.
Right. That's what we said amongst ourselves when that you guys were still exploring within your own brands, right? There are multiple Knob Creeks now, a rye here, a finished one there, a double cask there. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and from a marketing standpoint, you already have a built-in base of people who love that particular brand. So we figured it's got to be easier to extend an already established line.
Right.
Yep. The big word there is equity, right? People trust it, and that's a good thing.
Oh, it definitely is. So is there anything else that you'd want the people to know about Legent?
For me, I think it's, we're still very much in its infancy. It's only been out for a little over a year at this point. We did a very limited release across the country. We only went to about 10 different markets. Now with COVID, the e-com has definitely become more available in other markets that they weren't before. So if anybody is interested in ordering some Legent, go to Drizzly. I think it's a really cool whiskey to kind of make you think a little bit more. I'll be honest, I've drank a lot these last 5 months.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
Right there with you.
Yep.
Really sort of refine my notes, kind of going bottle by bottle, refining my tasting notes and things like that. So I would like for people to know that it's out there available. I would love people to know that it is a bourbon. As long as the day is long, it is a bourbon.
Yeah.
So it's a bourbon made for enjoyment. It's a bourbon can mixed with. Try a Black Manhattan with it. It's fantastic.
Awesome. Well, this has just been a great experience for us, Adam, and we can't thank you enough for coming on.
Yes, thank you so much, Adam.
I'd love to come on again sometime if you like.
Oh, we're going to have you on again. Trust me. It's a shame because we've been so enthusiastic about your other products. We've already done all 4 of the original small batch releases. Yeah. We've done Little Book Chapter 3, which is literally our favorite bourbon of all time.
Yeah.
But we do have to go back and check out the brand extending expressions that you guys have been putting out.
I think that's the trick, right? For people that have been doing this for a while like us, it's very hard to just talk about one whiskey.
Absolutely. We're also just getting into Japanese whiskeys. And in fact, we did an episode on the Toki, which we both really enjoyed.
Yes.
If you have a chance, you can find Hakushu. Anything you can get from that, whatever size, it's from the Mountain Distillery. I was there in January, and it was a come to Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah, if we ever get a bottle of Hakushu to feature it, we'll definitely have you back on because you telling the story about being at the Mountain Distillery, drinking it, is exactly what makes for good podcasting. So much better than, Scott and Ed went to the liquor store and bought a bottle.
Right.
Like it flows right out of the mountain like spring water. You just put your mug out there and fill it up.
I'll tell you one time about how one of my best whiskey drinking experiences was at Lefroy, actually. And I had always heard this story that the actual water source for the Lefroy comes out of a crack in a rock. And I said, is it true that the water source comes out of a crack in a rock? She goes, yes. I was like, can I see it? She says, yes. And so she takes us all up in the van. We have to hike over the moors and all this kind of stuff. And finally, after about a 30-minute walk, after an hour or so drive, we get to a stream, and we follow the stream to where it comes from, which is the crack in the rock. And I took some Lefroy 10, and I cut it with the water, the very source, and I drank it, and it was delicious.
Wow. Awesome.
That is an awesome story. Okay.
It really is.
I think that wraps it up. So if you're ever in Philly or anywhere in the New Jersey area, let us know. We'd love to get together.
Seriously.
That sounds great, man. Happy to come back and chat. Happy to make introductions wherever I can.
Thanks so much, Adam.
Take care.
All right, well, let's go around the horn here and everyone talk about what you think of Legent. Scott?
So tasting it more, I'm drinking the proof down version. Like Knob Creek had dark fruit flavors.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm getting here. A lower proof, though, because Knob Creek was my origin story. I like the mash bill. I like the peanuts and then a bit of the cherry flavor that the Knob Creek has. And geez, this is that concentrated. I love it. Gabe, what do you think?
It's very good. It's can imagine it being a good mixer. It's a good straight whiskey.
Yeah.
For the experiment that it is, it's very doable for that price.
Yeah.
This is definitely something that I want to pick up and both enjoy and then also play around with in cocktails as well. So 2 thumbs up.
I'll say this. It has a flavor profile unique to itself. Probably if you asked Fred Noah what he was looking for, he wanted something that was going to stand out. It definitely does.
I think there'd be an interesting comparison with the Basil Hayden Dark Rye.
Oh, yeah.
Or the Caribbean one, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? Rum, wine. Yeah. We're fans of finish. We're fans of blends. We're fans of bourbons.
Yeah, we're fans of anything done with a plan and done right.
Agreed. Oh, and if you'd like to follow Legent Bourbon on Instagram, it's at Legent Bourbon.
So we'd like to thank Gabby and, of course, Adam from Beam Suntory for coming on and being a part of this. We really appreciate them.
Yes, thank you so much.
And Anders, Gabe, thanks for being here.
Yep. Thanks for having us.
What are you looking at him for?
Did you say?
He said yelp.
I said,
Oh, all right. I thought you just nodded. I'm like, nod doesn't work on a podcast, asshole.
Wow.
Well, good thing you got a face for radio, Ed. I said,
that's a good one.
I'll rephrase it. Thank you for inviting me for this wonderful tasting. Did you hear that? Asshole.
So for the Whiskey Tangent Podcast, I'm Ed.
I'm Scott.
I'm Gabe.
I'm Anders.
Take care, everybody.
Later.